welcome to Study with Master Notes. Hope all you are fine. Okay, so thank you for your liking, commenting and subscribing my channel, that is Study with Master Notes. Again I am repeating and requesting all of you and your friends also, you can share the Study with Master Notes channel to get more notification about MEG subjects of IGNOU and your NET exam also. So for your request, one of the students request, I want to continue MEG 15 comparative literature theory and practice today. So today I will cover MEG 15 comparative literature theory and practice. So previously already I have covered 2 to 3 units of comparative Indian literature of block 3, that is block introduction, literature in Indian languages and the idea of modernity, and the unit 2 very much important, the center and periphery, which I already covered. Then I will cover unit 3 Choma's drum. Here it is also a very interesting and important chapter for you for exam point of view, that is Choma's drum. Okay, so today I will cover Choma's drum. So please viewers, like, share and subscribe to this channel and see the videos till the end, so that you will get all the information about Choma's drum, that is unit 3 comparative literature block 3, and by listening all the things and memorizing the key points, you can write down in your own words in exam and you will get good score. Okay, so I will go to Choma's drum. Okay, that is unit 3 Choma's drum. The center and periphery already I have covered, so you can go through the description box and notification as well as, so you will get the center and periphery videos. Okay, so today I will go Choma's drum, that is unit 3 Choma's drum. Okay, as the name suggests, that is Choma is a person and drum is a musical instrument. So all of you know about this. It's a very simple and physical phenomena. Okay, so here it is the structure, objectives, introduction, outline and salient features of the novel, contrast and polarities, extended usages and application of the drum symbol, the dominance of silence, the exteriorizing of powerful forces, Choma's attitude and its consequences, deeper reasons underlying Choma's behavior, hallmarks of the spirituality charged man, the finale of the novel, reassessing the importance of the drum. Let us sum up unit end questions, references and suggested readings. So every unit has its own objective, already I have told. So here it is the objectives, introduction, outline and salient features of the novel. So very much important is your Choma's attitude and its consequences, that is drum symbol, again your spirituality charged man. Okay, then reassessing the importance of drum. Okay, so here it is the main important key points we will cover in this unit. So we will go first, we will study the objectives. So what are the objectives or motive behind this unit? The objectives are both general and specific. On the general level, the objective is to make the learner sensitive to the presence of sound within the written word. Sound is an intrinsic and prior component in all forms of communication. Okay, before learning to write, the children learns to speak. Every piece of writing is heard, perceived as well as read. It is seen by ears, heard by the eyes, reading the print. Okay, so Among the objectives of this unit, it is I think it's a printing mistake or any word. It is seen by the ears, heard by the eyes. So you can see the before learning to write, the child learns to speak. Every piece of writing is heard, perceived as well as read. It is seen by eyes and heard by ears. Reading the print. Among the objective of this unit is to activate these multi-level, multi-sided areas of receptivity present in the reader in the act of reading, and thereby bind the reader closer to the written text in question. So here it is all about the general level. The objective is make learner sensitive to presence of sound. Okay, perception and reception. Here it is the unit general specific. General M. The drum in Choma's drum is a means to this inner awakening. Okay, so drum means beating of a musical instrument so that a person awake. Okay, it is a inner awakening. Okay, so a person should awake from the inner level or inner psychological level. The in-depth analysis of its bits made in the unit has thus in view the objective of drawing out the latent powers of higher understanding present in the reader, and thereby make the act of reading the novel and all reading a more enriching experience. After reading this unit, you will be able to discern the presence of sound within the written word. Understand how sound is an interesting and prior component in all forms of communication. Come alive to the richness of inner life possible even in the deprived sections of society as exemplified by Choma. Okay, so you will know the presence of sound in written word, then understand how sound is an interesting and prior component in all forms of communication. Without sound we cannot communicate in any form. Okay, so come alive to the richness of inner life possible even in the deprived sections of society as exemplified by Choma. So here is the introduction. When two cultures come into contact with each other, they either fight each other as they often do or interact creatively with each other as they often do. Okay, here it is the very important points you can note down. When two cultures come into contact with each other, they either fight each other or they interact, okay, creatively with each other as they often do. Okay, among the creative manifestations of cultural encounters, it can be said is literature. Literature is produced by writers from both cultures. When two cultures united, okay, two cultures united, the literature also united. Again, the literature produced by writers from both cultures. The East-West encounter in our own country, specifically the England-India encounter for instance, has resulted in a novel like E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, which is a story by an Englishman to touch the pulse of this country's sexual ethic. Okay, if you study in your MEC 3 British novel, that is E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, so you can know better. Okay, which is a story by an Englishman to touch the pulse of the country's sexual ethic, and it has also resulted in a novel like Raja Rao's The Serpent and the Rope, which is the story of an Indian attempts to free himself of the alienating powers of Western culture without becoming hostile to it. Okay, so the Englishman to touch the pulse of the country's sexual ethic, which was described in E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, whereas Raja Rao's The Serpent and the Rope, in which a story was written by Raja Rao's, that's Indian attempts to free himself of the alienating powers of Western culture without becoming hostile to it. Comparative literature has its origins in such struggles by writers to negotiate the ground between two cultures, create passages between them, build a two-way traffic. Two streams of thought and consciousness flow parallel to each other in comparative writings. So very important, you can know when world literature we study. So comparative literature or world literature are two parallel way of comparison and two parallel or two-way traffic, that one literature, ethics, moral values also transferred to another social, ethical and moral values of the society. An important point to keep in mind is that the two streams need not always be those of two separate cultures. They can be two strands of same culture. This is the perspective from which Sivaram Karnat's novel, Choma's Drum. The main text of this unit, Choma, Dudi, in the Kannada original, translated into English by U.R. Kalker, has been taken up. Okay, so you can write down. This is the perspective from which Sivaram Karnat's novel. From which novel Choma's Drum came? From Sivaram Karnat's novel. Okay, Sivaram Karnat's novel. The main text of this Chomana Dudi. Okay, the main text is Chomana Dudi, which is in Kannada original. Chomana Dudi in the Kannada original, translated into English by U.R. Kalker. Okay, U.R. Kalker has translated Chomana Dudi in the Kannada original, which is written by Sivaram Karnat's novel. Okay, Sivaram Karnath wrote the novel, that is Choma's Drum. Then we will go the denouement and the final outcome of the predicament of Choma come from the reunion of the two strands. Secondly, this reunion is inevitably violent. It is this violence that highlights in a powerful way the comparative gist and make of the novel. All About H. Hatterer by G.V. Desani. The second test we shall briefly consider in this unit conforms more to the definition of comparative literature as a product of the encounter of two cultures, the clash of two cultures. All About H. Hatterer by G.V. Desani. The second test we shall briefly consider in this unit conforms more to the definition of comparative literature as a product of the encounter of the two cultures, the clash of two cultures. It is about the attempts of the main character, Hatterer, an Indian migrant to England, to live and let live in white society. Okay, All About H. Hatterer by G.V. Desani. The second test we shall briefly consider in this unit. Okay, so comparative literature as a product of encounter of two cultures, the clash of two cultures. The attempts of the main character, Hatterer, an Indian migrant to England, to live and let live in white society. So Hatterer is a Indian migrant. Okay, Indian migrant to England. So you can note down the spelling of Hatterer, Hatteer. Okay, so here it is the main key point. Hatterer, an Indian migrant to England, to live and let live in white society. However, for purpose of this unit, we shall be mainly considering only by the symbol of the drum, which comes in for powerful even a brief rendering in this novel too. In Choma's Drum, as is explained in the unit, it is the drum that highlights the novel's comparative makeup. The drum figures briefly but tellingly in Hatterer, highlighting its speaking power. The drum figures briefly but tellingly in Hatterer, highlighting its speaking power. So briefly describe in around 100 or 150 words or so any experience of a hurdle you have faced for all Western culture on your own. Okay? You are facing almost all Western cultures influence. So you can write on your own words. Okay. So here it is the activity 1. Then we will go 3.2 outline and salient features of the novel. Before we begin to discuss the novel, let us take a brief look at the author Sivaram Karnath. K. Sivaram Karnath, 10 October 1902 to 9 December 1997 was a Kannada writer, social activist, environmentalist, Yakshagana artist, filmmaker and thinker. So we will study about the author of the novel first. So who is the author of the novel Choma's Drum? So we already studied it is a Kannada novel and K. Sivaram Karnath is the writer. So K. Sivaram Karnath, 10 October 1902 is his date of birth and 9 December 1907 is his date of K. Sivaram Karnath. So, as a Kannada writer, social activist, environmentalist, Yakshagana artist, filmmaker and thinker. So, Ramachandra Guha called him the Rabindranath Tagore of modern India. So, who called Rabindranath Tagore of modern India? To whom? So, you can write down the name, that is Ramachandra Guha. So, called him Rabindranath Tagore of modern India to K. Sivaram Karnath. Okay, to K. Sivaram Karnath. Modern India, who has been one of the finest novelist activists since independence. He was the third writer to be decorated with Gyanpith Award for Kannada, the highest literary honor conferred in India. So, he was the third writer to be decorated with the Gyanpith Award for Kannada, the highest literary honor conferred in India. He was the third writer to be decorated with the Gyanpith Award for Kannada, the highest literary honor conferred in India. Okay, third writer to be decorated with the Gyanpith Award for Kannada. So, considered to be one of the most influential Kannada novelists, he wrote, apart from his 47 novels, 31 plays, 4 short story collections, 6 books of essays and sketches, 13 books on art, 2 volumes of poems, 9 encyclopedias, and over 100 articles on various issues. So, you should remember his writings. Okay, so his writings he wrote apart from his 47 novels, 31 plays. Okay, so Choma is a translation of the Kannada novel Chomana Dudi, which was later made into an acclaimed film of the same name. Okay, Chomana Dudi we already read, that is in Kannada language. So, Chomastram is a translation of the Kannada novel Chomana Dudi, which was later made into an acclaimed film of the same name. So, Choma is an untouchable bonded laborer in a village who is working along with his family for a landlord. So, we will go to the story details. So, it is very enjoying. So, all of you listen the story which I am reading and you know all its meaning also. Okay. So, Choma is an untouchable bonded laborer in a village who is working along with his family for a landlord. As he belongs to a backward class, due to his social status, he is not allowed to till his own land, something that he desires most. Though he managed to rear a pair of bullocks that he found straying in the forest, he cannot use them to till the land. He comes in contact of Christian missionaries who try to convert him, giving him the lure of the land, but Choma does not want to let go of his faith. He realizes the fury that fate has beset on him by beating his drum. So, in the first paragraph, you can see a Choma is an untouchable bonded laborer in a village. Okay, so bonded laborer has some limitations inside the village. So, that is described in the first paragraph. He has 4 sons and a daughter. 2 of his elder sons work in a distant coffee estate trying to pay off the debt. Okay, one of the sons dies of cholera and the other one converts to Christianity by marrying a Christian girl. His daughter Belly works in the plantation and falls for the charm of Manvela, the estate owner's writer. Okay, his daughter's name was Veli. So, Veli works in the plantation and falls for the charm of Manvela, the estate owner's writer. She is raped by the estate owner, who then writes of Choma's debt. Okay, so she is raped by the estate owner and who then writes of Choma's debt. She returns to Choma's home, telling him of the reality. His youngest son drowns in the river with nobody coming to save him because of him being an untouchable. Okay, so how cruel was the society at that time, you can see. His youngest son drowns in the river and with nobody coming to save him because of him being an untouchable. He then finds his daughter in a compromising position with Manvela. Okay, he then finds his daughter in a compromising position with Manvela, With anger, he beats her and kicks her out of the house. Okay, so with anger, he beats her and kicks her out of the house. To defy his fate, he starts tilling a piece of land and then chases off his bullock into the forest. To defy his fate, he starts tilling a piece of land and then chases off his bullock into the forest. Okay, so defy his fate, he starts tilling a piece of land and then chases off his bullock into the forest. In the climax, Choma sorts himself in the house and starts playing the drum till he dies. Okay, to defy his fate, he starts tilling a piece of land and then chases off his bullock into the forest. So in the climax, Choma sorts himself in the house and starts playing the drum till he dies. The take-off point of Sevram Karnar's novel Choma's Drum can be said to lie in the intense craving of Choma, a Dalit, to become a landowner. By unwritten but strongly rooted, entrenched social norms, Dalits are not meant to be owners of land. So landowners can only be from the upper caste. Dalits are meant to labor for and on the lands of the culturally sanctioned landowners. So Dalits are meant to labor for and on the lands of the culturally sanctioned landowners. Okay. So in these terms, considered uncrushable, that Choma is bent on crushing, leaping, and thus breach all norms set by caste injunctions. Okay, so it is the charm considered uncrushable that Choma is bent on crushing, leaping, and thus breach all norms set by caste injunctions. So intense in Choma's craving that he has taken the leap mentally and is preparing himself for the life of a landowner. So intense is Choma's craving that he has taken the leap mentally and is preparing himself for the life of a landowner. He is rearing a pair of oxen for plowing this land, he is convinced. He will acquire one day. He is, in other words, living in a state of psychological imbalance. Rocked by emotional intensities set up by this imbalance, he is also ready to convert to Christianity or religion free of caste divisions and with room for making his craving come true. This decision of his to convert to Christianity is the climax of the novel, and it is a decision that he gives up. He cannot bring himself to perform what he is coming to see as an act of crass, cowardly desertion. His god Panchurli, the god of the Dalits, okay, his god Panchurli, the god of the Dalits, seems to be looking at him. Okay, so here it is the main key point you can note down. His god Panchurli, the god of the Dalits, okay, Panchurli, the god of the Dalits, seems to be looking at him with eyes that are questioning, eyes that are sad, but not accusing, not questioning his right to live. Choma revokes his decision to convert purely from the upsurge of his own feelings of faithfulness and loyalty risen above consideration of possession and material hankerings. It is an inner awakening, and in the force of its manifestation, all the distinctions and divisions of poor and rich, of this caste and that, of haves and have-nots, get subsumed. However, none of the ills is denied. Caste, its injustice and tyrannies are not written off. Graphic pictures of the daily lives and caste-specific, caste-backed ordeals of Dalits are present in the novel. Guests descend in a continuous stream on Choma's hungry household, and he cannot refuse them hospitality. Okay, so caste, its injustices and tyrannies are not written off. Graphic pictures of the daily lives and caste-specific, caste-backed ordeals of Dalits are present in the novel. Guests descend in a continuous stream on Choma's hungry household, and he cannot refuse them hospitality. Okay. One of his sons drowns in the river. The upper caste and lookers on the bank could have saved him by jumping in and dragging him ashore, but their fear of physical contact with an untouchable overrides their sense of compassion. Okay, so here it is the activity 2. Read the introduction in Choma's drum written by U.R. Kalkar, in which he dwells upon the essentially non-casteist Karnath's bent of mind. Jot down your thoughts and impression of Indian society in that context. Then contrast and polarities. Here it is the main key point, you can note down the contrast and polarities. Okay. So question asks about what is the contrast and polarities of Choma's drum. So we see the operation of contrast and polarities in the very first chapter of this novel. In its opening lines, darkness and light, motion and arrest, sound and silence. Okay, so darkness and light, motion and arrest, sound and silence. It is pitch dark. The fearsome forest in dark, in which even the fireflies do not twinkle anywhere to bridge it. In the dead stillness, not a leaf stirs, not a worm rustle under the dry leaves that lie thick on ground, nothing sound, not even a token of it. Okay, in the dead stillness, not a leaf stirs, not a worm insect rustles under the dry leaves that lie thick on ground, nothing sound, not even a token of it. The quality of the sound and silence dimension is further broken down, making it one more strand in the comparative wave of the writing. The growl of the panther, the screech of the owl, the clamor of the night insects are juxtaposed, placed alongside each other till sound seems a multidimensional presence only to be declared a non-presence at the conclusion of the sentence. All are hushed. Sound and aftermath of sound, in which both sound and silence ring, are infused into that paragraph. Sound and silence, in other words, are simultaneous presences. They seem to form a special compound of the air of Vogana village, the locale of the novel, as the story moves on. So, in which village Choma was living, that is Vogana village. Okay, the locale of the novel as the story moves on. How does this happen? By the way Karnath projects the sound of Choma's drum, projects the beats of his drum as phenomena of shattering power and magnitude, seem rising from the very air of Vogana village, and not just sounds made by Choma's hands on his drum. There is also the invoking of the idea of silence in the heart of the sound. This is how he puts it in this longest paragraph. In this terrain, every sound rolling back and forth from hillock to hillock mingles with its echo and re-echo before impinging on the ears. Dama dhama, dhaka dhaka. Okay, so you can notice the sound structure, that is dama dama and dhaka dhaka. It goes on for 8 or 10 minutes, sometimes slow, like the fall of a hammer at a smithy, sometimes frantic, like the pounding heart of an animal in its last gasp. Let us examine those lines in some detail. First, it's slow moving. The writing is even placed, not marked by any rush of breath to say it fast and bask in the writer's pleasure of an onrush of words. And because of the slow unfolding of the sentence, there is a sense of second presence as a throw off of the first. Every sound as it rolls back and forth from hillock to hillock mingles with its echo and re-echo before impinging on the ears, rounds the sentence. In the slow unfolding of the sentence, echo and re-echo seem more than byproducts of sound. They seem like siblings of sound, closely related to it, yet with distinct personalities of their own. And they seem to be in the background, the immediate background, yet distinct from it. The second factor that captures and holds the reading attention is the verbalizing by the writer of the beats of the drum, dama dama, dhaka dhaka. The double consonants M and K make you, the reader, pause and lay stress over them in an involuntary modulation of voice. The voice action is important. It has an inward pull, and the pressure inward activates your reflexes of pictorialization, like a camera being clicked on. What you see on the screen of your mind is a clearing A stretch of space effortlessly insulted from noise, its fellow, perhaps its parent. The motionless yet seeing ever entity is silence you feel. This axis of sound and silence gathers presence and seems to become more real in the concluding lines of that paragraph. The beat of the drum, goes on for 8 or 10 minutes, sometimes slow like the fall of the hammer at a smithy, sometimes frantic like the pounding heart of an animal in its last gasp. Again, the writing is in slow motion. The descriptive lines are definite and solid sounding, with similes that unfold into image straight away. The duration of the beats and the quality of the beats, the sense of dread they rose, none of this is left to the reader's imagination. Each aspect of the beats is precisely set down. The unhurried tone of the writing, along with the explorative quality of the similes, seems to exert its own pressure on the lines. They seem to fade from the reader's vision and suggest a reality that is the antonym of the noise and sound. What else can the antonym be but silence? It is not named. What is inferable? Strongly so. 2 lines later, it becomes more than inferable. It comes in for being stated as a fact. The drumming stops abruptly. The cessation of sound is total, and this totality is so strong, so pervasive, that the idea and sense of silence rise in the reader's mind without effort. It rises on the heels of sound, seems reality ever present behind the scene, breaking into view at the first chance. Read the chapter discussed above. Do the beats of drum, dhama dhama and dhaka dhaka evoke similar reaction from you? Are you moved to saying them aloud? Do the lines of description of the beats that Karnath gives echo somewhere in your own ears as you recite that beats? Try and note down the phrases and images that flash or go up in your mind as you recite the beats. Let us now look at the polarities in the same chapter. From Bhogana village, the scene shifts to an adjacent village, Panja, where the annual temple festival is going on. This brings in the factor of religious fervor into the folds of the novel, and this in turn brings in its own polarities. We see the contrasting states of religious stamina or arousal and the aftermath of the arousal when all the participants, priests and worshippers are drained of energy. This arousal versus the democracy of religious jest constitutes one more strand in the crisscross of comparativism that marks the novel. Let us examine this strand and the further polarization it leads to. So here in this paragraph you can note down, here the adjacent village Panja is the main key point. From Bhogana village, the scene shifts to the adjacent village Panja, where the worships of God was there. So arousal, the aftermath of the arousal when all the participants, priests and worshippers are there and they drained of their energies. The arousal versus the dormancy of religious jest constitutes one more strand in the crisscross of comparativism marks the novel. Let us examine this strand and the further polarization it leads to. It is subdivided along class lines. The worshippers are soon trudging back home after the festivities. The bulk of them are poor, though not landless, not subject to chronic hunger. There is not bare-bone living. It is a state just better than that. Okay, the bulk of them are poor, though not landless, nor subject to chronic hunger. So theirs is not bare-bone living. It is a state just better than that. But among them is also Sankapaya, the landlord. Okay, so here it is the landlord came. So landlord name is Sankapaya. Okay, so Sankarpaya or Sankapaya. Sankapaya is the landlord's name. No details are given about him, nor is there anything to suggest that there were others of his class in the crowd returning home from the festival, but the word landlord is enough to rouse a sense of distance and demarcation of him from the rest. Okay, but the word landlord is enough to rouse a sense of distance and demarcation of him from the rest. None other in the crowd is designed in any way. The polarization that springs to mind here is that of the vast, toiling and anonymous majority versus the non-toiling ruling minority endowed with personality. So landlord is enough to rouse a sense of distance and demarcation of him from the rest. None other in the crowd is designated in a way. The polarization that springs to mind here is that of the vast, toiling and anonymous majority versus the non-toiling ruling minority endowed with personality. This factor of personality and presence in another strand introduced by Karnath for bringing in yet another polarity in his story, the personality of the insecure, emotionally high-strung Dalit versus that of the composed, unflappable personality of the land-owning upper class. Okay, so this factor of personality and presence is another strand introduced by Karnath for bringing in yet another polarity in his story, the personality of the insecure, emotionally high-strung Dalit versus that of the composed, unflappable personality of the land-owning upper class. This contrast comes in for vivid expression in the depiction of the crowd at the temple festivities. We see that despite hunger, Choma's and his family's zest for temple going is unaffected, and they go hungry and famished to dance for the god. Choma has hopes of seeing Sankapaya at the temple and conveying to him his dire condition and urgent need for relief. He runs into him there, and his eyes and lips radiated a smile, and he bowed worshipfully, hoping that his wished rent land will be understood. Sankapaya absolutely does not read the desperation and the plea in his bondsman's eyes. Okay, Sankapaya absolutely does not read the desperation and the plea in his bondsman's eyes. He is pleasant, and that's all. It's not that he is not aware of his desperation. He has a giving hat earlier. He has handed out rations to Choma before the due time to help him tide over the influx of guests in his house. Charity is part of his makeup, but it is a vein in his personality of fat, and it is up to him to decide when to activate this fat, give it the green signal to come into play. We can call it the freedom to be passive. It is a freedom not available to the Dalit Choma. It is the freedom of choice available only to the high caste non-Dalit Sankapaya. Haven't Dalits down the edges been passive about their state? One may ask. Yes, they have been, one agrees. But the Dalits' passivity is not one of choice. Theirs is the passivity bred by a fatalistic acceptance of their lot. It is this passivity of the dead-ended man, the born under dog, that Karnath draws upon the dramatic substance and weight to his novel. Okay, Karnath draws upon for dramatic substance and weight to this novel. The passivity is transformed into a simmering state capable of erupting into a fury of destruction any time. The drum is the symbol of this irascible state. So try to classify Sankapaya's behavior. Would you call his unwillingness to rent out land to Choma an act of caste, class or caste bias, helplessness in the face of caste injunctions, simply an act of cowardice? We shall make here a brief recap of the sequence of events that led up to and create his mode of violence held in lists for a more in-depth understanding of the events that follow. That is, see chapter 1, page 13, from para 3 to para 7 and end of chapter. So after that, Choma goes back home after this fruitless meeting with Sankapaya. Hunger, not only his own but also his families of 2 sons and 2 daughters, is weighing him down. The aftermath of the religious ecstasy that had swept over him and his family is also unsettling him. In this state of hunger and fatigue, of inertness and irascibility, he reaches for his drum, beats on it. Beli, his daughter, sings to his beats. Le, la. She sings, okay? Le, La, she sings, but a dance also seems called for. The beats demand it. Billy would like it too, but she is not the dancing sort. It is this compelling need for dance, not fulfillable in the circumstances, that gives tether and footing to that whole interlude. Okay, so it is a compelling need for dance, not fulfillable in the circumstances, that gives tether and footing to that whole interlude. The idea of dances is built into it. Choma beats. Okay, so you can see Choma beats at his drum between bouts of sleep and weariness. Each time he beats gain in vigor, they build the sense of an impending climax and explosive occurrence. The last line of the segment sums up this idea of presaging. The drum was to him what the damru was to Lord Shiva. Let us now briefly consider the significance of the damaru. The damaru signifies an event that is either impending, looming, or just over. It is firstly a sign of warning, of caution. Secondly, it is a language, the language of sound, with words latent in it. The introduction of the symbol of the damaru by Karnath reinforces and makes more immediate the sense of crisis and foreboding that the drumming of Choma creates. Both the symbols, that of Choma's drum and Shiva's damaru, suggest words through the crash of sound cast in an idiom of both non-verbal and verbal. Okay, here it is the main key point. You can note down both the symbols, that is Choma's drum and Shiva's damaru, suggest the words through the crash of sound cast in an idiom or both the non-verbal and verbal. The axis of the non-verbal versus the verbal is the backbone of the novel. So here it is the main key point. You can note down the axis of the non-verbal versus the verbal is the backbone of the novel. The dhvani, the resonance of the drum or damaru axis is a vasa, a language, and Karnath in this at this juncture lays the foundation of this vasa, a vasa that divides as well as unifies the novel, thereby giving it its comparative fiber. The damaru reinforces the symbol strength of the drum. Would you agree? Make a brief note of your views. Then we will go extended uses and application of the drum symbol. Okay, so we will go extended usages and application of the drum symbol. Choma takes recourse to the drum not just on the occasions when words fail him from a state of extreme arousal, as we see in chapter 1, the sense of a collapse within, of a loss of voice over and above the loss of words, like a chasm sprung within him, also deprives him to his drum. Okay, so we see in this chapter 2, Veli, his daughter, gives him a sharp rebuke for his idea of asking Sankapaya to rent out to him a piece of land that he could cultivate and see his dream of being a landowner come true. A whole history of privation, denial, and hopeless cherishing of hopes gets evoked in that chain of sharp rebuke and choiceless accusations. It is this quivery voice of history that we hear in that flat monotone of Choma's reminiscing, I had hoped, he says, to be a farmer during my wife's lifetime, but it was not given to her to she me. So, since her death, I have been hoping that my children will see me realize my dream. Should you now try to kill my hopes? The answer embedded in that question of Choma's is yes. There are hopes that have to be killed. Belly is conveying that answer, reflecting it in her own wide-eyed, speechless state that overtakes her after her initial burst of sharp speaking. Then we will go the dominance of silence, that is 3.4.1. So we will go the dominance of silence. Okay, the dominance of silence.